It was the kind of cold that made your breath feel like smoke. The kind of cold that sank into your bones and stayed there. Snow fell steadily over the glittering streets of Manhattan, blanketing the sidewalks in white silence. New York looked beautiful on nights like this. Clean, peaceful, like a city without scars. But beneath that quiet, the city still had secrets, still had pain. Near the corner of Fifth Avenue and 48th Street, tucked between a trash bin and the side of a coffee shop, sat a boy, barely 10 years old, skinny, pale, his hoodie soaked through and clinging to his arms like wet paper. He wasn't crying. He wasn't begging. He just sat there with his knees pulled to his chest, staring at nothing. People walked by him, some glancing, most not. A few looked like they wanted to say something, but then kept going. It was easier that way. That was the New York way. Keep your head down. Don't get involved. But then a car, sleek, black, and completely out of place, slowed down beside the curb. A limousine. The back window was tinted dark, but the rear door clicked open, and out stepped a man in a tailored charcoal suit, scarf perfectly knotted, shoes that hadn't touched a puddle in years. Lucas Stanford. Most people in the city knew the name. Billionaire tech magnate, founder of Sentinel Corporation. Some called him a genius, others called him heartless. He didn't care much for either. He didn't do interviews, didn't do charity. He built empires, bought companies, fired people with a single click. His face had been on Forbes and Fortune, but he always wore the same expression in every photo. Cold, unreadable, untouchable. And yet, on that snowy street corner, something tugged at him. Lucas had just left a board meeting uptown. His assistant had been rambling about schedules, press conferences, and stock price updates, but Lucas hadn't heard a word, because from the back seat, he'd seen something. No, someone on the sidewalk. And now he was standing in front of the boy, ignoring the freezing wind cutting through his coat while the city buzzed around them. The boy didn't even look up. "What's your name?" Lucas asked. The boy hesitated, his voice a barely audible whisper. "Jaden." "You out here alone, Jaden?" A nod. Lucas studied him. There were bruises on the boy's wrists, old ones. His hands were purple from the cold. He had a small backpack beside him, torn, stained. And around his neck, barely visible beneath the hoodie, was a chain, a necklace. A tiny metal heart clung to it like it hadn't been taken off in years. "You hungry?" Jaden didn't answer. "Get in the car." The boy finally looked up. His eyes were dark, sunken, but there was something else in them too, something familiar. Lucas blinked, confused by the sudden surge in his chest. It wasn't pity, it was something sharper, something deeper. He'd seen those eyes before, a long time ago. Jaden hesitated, unsure if it was a trick, but something in Lucas's voice, calm, certain, made him stand. Slowly, he picked up his bag and climbed into the warm leather interior of the limousine. Lucas followed. Back in the car, silence stretched between them. Jaden stared at his hands, not sure what to say. Lucas watched him from the corner of his eye, his mind racing with questions. Why had he stopped? He'd walked past hundreds of homeless people in his life and never blinked. He donated to causes, sure, on paper, but never like this. Never personally, never face to face. But something about this kid, that necklace, Lucas couldn't stop looking at it. It looked so much like... He shook the thought from his head. It couldn't be. That was 20 years ago. That was a different life. "Where are your parents?" he asked. Jaden shrugged. "Don't have any." "You were in foster care?" The boy nodded slowly. "For a while, then I left." Lucas didn't ask why. He'd heard enough stories. Abuse, neglect, overcrowded homes, kids slipping through the cracks. "What's that around your neck?" Lucas asked casually. Jaden instinctively clutched the necklace and tucked it under his shirt. "Just something my mom left me." "Your mom?" "She died a long time ago. They said she gave it to me when I was born." Lucas's jaw clenched, but he said nothing. By the time they arrived at Lucas's penthouse, Jaden was fast asleep in the back seat. Lucas stared at him for a long time before gently waking him. "Come on," he said. "Let's get you warm." Inside the sleek, high-rise apartment, Jaden's eyes widened. The ceilings were impossibly high. The lights dimmed automatically. There was a fireplace that flickered without wood, but nothing about it felt lived in. No photos, no clutter, just silence and clean lines. Lucas showed him to a guest room with its own bathroom and fresh clothes. Jaden didn't say much, just nodded and whispered a quiet "thank you" before disappearing behind the door. That night, Lucas stood in front of his office window, drink in hand, staring out over the city. He thought of Isabella. He hadn't done that in a long time. 20 years ago, she was everything to him, gentle, kind, with the kind of laughter that lingered in the air. She was 7 months pregnant when it happened. A drunk driver ran a red light. The crash was brutal. The doctors told Lucas they couldn't save her, or the baby. He had no funeral, just a box of ashes, and a necklace. That necklace, the one he'd given her on their wedding day, heart-shaped, with a custom engraving, "To my angel." He'd never seen it again. Until tonight. Lucas didn't sleep. He couldn't. The boy was a stranger, a coincidence, a cruel trick played by his mind. That had to be it. But deep down, something was shifting. A storm that had been still for decades was starting to stir. And somewhere, just down the hallway, a 10-year-old boy slept peacefully for the first time in weeks, unaware that the man who took him in was about to uncover a truth that would change both of their lives forever. The next morning, the sun barely reached the penthouse windows through a thick blanket of clouds. Lucas was already up, seated at the marble kitchen island, staring into a black cup of coffee that had long gone cold. He hadn't slept. Not really. Somewhere in the room down the hall was a boy with eyes like Isabella's and a necklace that shouldn't exist. He should have called someone. Child services, maybe. But every time he thought about it, something inside him pushed back. It wasn't logic. It wasn't even guilt. It was instinct, as if fate had dropped this boy into his life for a reason he hadn't figured out yet. Jaden shuffled into the kitchen wearing one of Lucas's t-shirts, oversized and hanging down to his knees. His hair was still damp from a shower. He looked more like a child now, less like a survivor. "Morning," Lucas said, voice low. "Morning," Jaden replied. The boy sat down across from him without being asked. He looked more comfortable than he had any right to, considering this wasn't his home. And yet, he fit. Too well. Lucas pushed a plate toward him, toast, eggs, and fruit. Jaden hesitated for only a second before digging in. They ate in silence for a while, the clink of fork on porcelain the only sound between them. "You sleep okay?" Lucas finally asked. Jaden nodded. "Best sleep I've had in a long time." Lucas raised an eyebrow. "That's so?" "Yeah, the bed's soft, and it's warm. I'm not used to warm." Lucas said nothing, but the boy's words sat heavy in his chest. That day, Lucas canceled his meetings. He stayed home, observing Jaden from afar. The boy was curious but respectful. He wandered the halls, careful not to touch too much, like a visitor in a museum. In the library, he pulled books off the shelves, some far too advanced for a child his age, but he read them with surprising focus. That night, they watched a movie together. Jaden curled up on one end of the couch, knees tucked under him. Lucas sat stiffly at the other end, hands folded, unsure what he was doing. The film was some old animated classic. Lucas had barely registered the title, but halfway through, Jaden leaned against the armrest, his head beginning to bob. Lucas glanced over and froze. Jaden had fallen asleep again, but this time, the necklace was out. It dangled loosely over his chest, gleaming softly in the television light. Lucas's breath caught in his throat. That necklace, that same heart-shaped charm. He remembered buying it at a small antique jeweler in Paris. Isabella had fallen in love with it the second she saw it. He'd engraved the back himself. Crude but heartfelt. He stared at it now. The edges, the slight scratch on the side. It was identical. This wasn't a replica. It was hers. Later that night, long after Jaden had been gently carried to bed, Lucas sat in his study with the lights off. He stared at an old photo, the last one he ever took with Isabella. Her face smiled up at him, radiant, eyes full of light. Her hands were on her belly. She was glowing. 7 months pregnant, and already in love with a child she never got to meet, or so he'd believed. 20 years ago, the hospital called him while he was still on the plane returning from a tech conference. Isabella had been in a car accident. By the time he arrived, they told him both mother and baby were gone. There had been complications, emergency transport delays. Lucas was devastated and at the time too numb to question anything. He never saw a body, just ashes. Now sitting in the dark, he wondered how much of that story had been a lie. The next morning, Lucas made a call. "Martin," he said when his private investigator picked up, "I need you to do a deep dive. Medical records, hospital logs, foster care files, everything. I need to know if a woman named Isabella Stanford gave birth 20 years ago. And if she did, what happened to the child?" "Sir, that's going to take time," Martin replied. "Do whatever it takes. Just find the truth." Lucas hung up and stared out the window. If there was even a chance. The days passed slowly, quietly. Jaden remained in the house, filling it with a warmth that hadn't existed there in 2 decades. He helped clean dishes without being asked. He read every book Lucas gave him. He loved chess, even though he didn't know the rules at first. Lucas taught him. And when Jaden finally beat him on their 7th game, the boy's grin lit up the entire room. Lucas found himself laughing, really laughing, for the first time in years. He didn't know what this feeling was, this quiet joy, this aching hope, but he didn't want it to stop. Still, he didn't say anything about the necklace, or his suspicions. Not yet, not until he had proof. But at night, when the house fell silent, Lucas would replay every word Jaden had said. "They said she gave it to me when I was born. She, his mother, and that necklace." One evening, as they sat together finishing dinner, Jaden suddenly looked up. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure. Why'd you help me?" Lucas blinked. The question had caught him off guard. "I don't know," he answered truthfully. "You reminded me of someone I lost." Jaden tilted his head. "Your son?" Lucas stared at him. For a long time he said nothing. Then softly, "No, my wife. She was pregnant, but I lost them both." Jaden lowered his eyes. "I'm sorry." Lucas nodded slowly. "Me too." Neither of them spoke for a long time after that, but in the quiet something passed between them. Not blood, not names, but something deeper. Recognition. Outside, snow began to fall again. Soft, slow flakes drifting down over a city full of secrets. And inside, in a house once hollow with silence, a boy and a man, once strangers, sat beneath the warm hum of light, unknowingly standing on the edge of a truth that would shake the foundations of both their lives. A week passed. The city marched on, unaware of what was unfolding behind the tall glass windows of Lucas Stanford's penthouse. Jaden settled into a quiet routine. He never asked for much, just food, a warm bed, and the occasional book. He didn't touch the expensive things, didn't wander too far. But what struck Lucas most was that Jaden never questioned why he was still there. It was as if, deep down, he didn't want to leave, and neither did Lucas want him to. Every morning, Lucas told himself he needed to make a decision, that this couldn't go on, that bringing a child off the street into his life, into his home, without legal guardianship, without a plan, was reckless, irresponsible. But every time Jaden smiled or made a joke at breakfast, or fell asleep on the couch with that necklace against his chest, logic went quiet. Lucas couldn't deny it anymore. He felt something for this child, something that didn't make sense, something that terrified him. And then the phone call came. It was just after lunch. Jaden was watching a nature documentary in the living room when Lucas stepped into his office to take the call. "Lucas," Martin's voice came through the speaker. "I found something. You'd better sit down." Lucas didn't sit. He gripped the edge of the desk, his stomach already tight. 20 years ago, your wife was rushed to East River Medical Center, not St. Joseph's like the accident report said. She survived the crash, barely. They managed to deliver the baby, a boy, 7 weeks premature. Lucas's blood ran cold. The baby was put in neonatal intensive care, but there was confusion with the paperwork. Somehow your name never made it onto the birth certificate. The attending nurse, a woman named Sarah Langford, noted that the mother passed shortly after delivery. No next of kin was listed. And what? Lucas whispered. The boy was placed into the foster care system under the name Jaden Langford. The room spun. Lucas couldn't speak. There's more, Martin continued. I pulled a photo from the case file. The nurse who took care of the baby, she wore a necklace, the same one you described. She said the mother insisted it be given to the child when he turned 5. Lucas sat down. Hard. Jaden. It was him. His son. His son was alive. And he had been living on the streets, completely alone, completely forgotten, while Lucas spent 20 years in mourning, convinced both of them had died. That night, Lucas barely ate. He watched Jaden across the table, stunned by how obvious it now seemed. The boy's expressions, the tone of his voice, the way he tilted his head, just like Isabella used to when she was trying to understand something complex. He wanted to say it right then, to pull the boy into his arms and tell him everything. But something held him back. Jaden had lived a hard life. He wasn't just some puzzle piece falling neatly into place. He was a child who had been abandoned, hurt, shuffled from home to home, sleeping under bridges and in subway stations. And now here he was, trusting Lucas, opening up, smiling again. Lucas couldn't risk shattering that with a truth too big, too fast. Not until he had more. He called Martin again. Get me a DNA kit, he said. Priority shipping. The results came back in 2 days. Positive. 99.99% match. Jaden Langford was Jaden Stanford, the son Lucas had believed lost forever. Lucas didn't cry when he saw the paper. He just sat there, the document open in front of him, staring at the numbers, at the names. A quiet storm built in his chest. Guilt, anger, awe, relief. 20 years. 20 years of emptiness. And now this child, this boy who had appeared out of the cold like a ghost from the past, was his son. That evening, Lucas sat on the edge of Jaden's bed while the boy read. Can I talk to you? He asked softly. Jaden looked up from his book. Sure. Lucas reached into his pocket and pulled out the DNA report. He didn't hand it over, just looked at it, eyes heavy. I haven't been honest with you, Lucas began, about why I brought you here. Jaden sat up straighter, nervous. Are you sending me away? No, Lucas said quickly. God, no. Just the opposite. He took a breath. I knew someone a long time ago. Her name was Isabella. She was, everything to me. We were going to have a child, a son, but there was an accident. I was told they both died. He paused, voice tight. But that wasn't true. Isabella survived long enough to give birth, and that child was you. Jaden's eyes widened. I don't understand. You're my son, Jaden, Lucas said, his voice cracking. You're my son. Jaden blinked. The room fell silent. The boy didn't move. He just stared, the necklace suddenly heavy on his chest. Lucas continued, barely able to speak. That necklace, I gave it to your mother. On our wedding day, she wore it until the day she died. She made sure it reached you. She tried to leave you something of her, and somehow, by some miracle, fate brought you back to me. Jaden finally found his voice. But I don't remember her. I don't remember anything. You were just a baby, Lucas said gently. It's not your fault. Jaden looked down at the necklace, fingers trembling. Is this real? He whispered. You're really my dad? Lucas nodded. I never stopped missing you, he said, even when I didn't know I was missing you. Jaden threw himself forward, arms wrapping tight around Lucas's chest. Lucas held him, burying his face in the boy's shoulder. Overcome with emotion he hadn't let himself feel in 2 decades. They stayed like that for a long time, father and son, tangled in the threads of a broken past finally stitched back together. Jaden didn't speak much the next morning. He ate breakfast slowly, not because he wasn't hungry, but because he didn't know what to say. The kitchen, once cozy in its quiet routine, now felt like the center of a world that had just tilted sideways. Across the table, Lucas watched him, trying to pretend everything was normal. But there was a tremor in his hand as he stirred his coffee. His eyes were red. Neither of them had slept. The night before had changed everything. Jaden now knew the truth. The man who had brought him in from the cold, who had fed him and given him books and a place to sleep, was not just a kind stranger. He was his father, his real father. But knowing and believing were two different things. Jaden had spent his whole life being told he didn't matter, that he was unwanted, forgotten, abandoned. Believing anything different felt dangerous. So he didn't say much. He just kept his head down, pushing a piece of toast around his plate. Lucas finally broke the silence. "I thought we could go somewhere today," he said, trying to keep his voice light. "Somewhere I think you should see." Jaden looked up. "Where?" Lucas hesitated, then said gently, "To visit your mother." The car ride was quiet, but not uncomfortable. Jaden stared out the window, watching the buildings pass in slow motion. Lucas sat beside him, hands clasped, trying not to overwhelm the boy with too many words. He understood what this meant. For Jaden, this wasn't just a visit to a grave. It was meeting a ghost for the first time, a name he'd only heard in stories, a woman whose face he didn't remember, but whose loss had shaped his entire life. The cemetery sat on the outskirts of the city, overlooking a quiet hill. Lucas led the way through the rows, stopping in front of a simple stone. Isabella Stanford, loving wife and mother, 19, 79 to 2005. Jaden stared at it for a long time. Then he sat down on the grass, cross-legged, silent. Lucas stood beside him, giving him space. "I come here every year," Lucas said softly, "but not to mourn her, to remember her. The way she laughed, the way she believed people could be good, even when the world wasn't." Jaden didn't look up. He was still staring at the grave, a thousand emotions flickering behind his eyes. "She wanted you," Lucas added, "so badly. You were all she talked about. She picked your name. She sang to you, even when she was in pain, even when she knew she might not make it." Jaden's lips parted. "No one ever told me anything," he whispered. "Not about her, not about you." Lucas nodded, crouching beside him. "They failed you. I failed you too. I should have fought harder to find the truth. But I believe what they told me, that you were gone, that there was nothing left." Jaden looked up finally. "Why did they lie?" Lucas swallowed hard. "I don't know. Maybe it was just a mistake, a system that didn't care enough. Or maybe someone didn't think it mattered." Jaden blinked, tears threatening to fall. "But it mattered to me." Lucas reached out, gently placing a hand on Jaden's shoulder. "It matters to me too." Back home, things didn't go back to normal right away. There was no script for this kind of reunion, no guidebook on how to suddenly be a father to a boy who had lived 10 years without you. Some days Jaden was quiet, distant, afraid to trust the moment. Other days he clung to Lucas like he was afraid to let go. They had dinner together, played more chess, and Lucas even started helping Jaden with schoolwork, something he hadn't done since he was a student himself. But there were still walls, invisible ones. Lucas knew they would take time to break down. He let Jaden set the pace. One evening, as they sat watching a documentary about deep-sea creatures, Jaden's new obsession, he turned to Lucas with a hesitant voice. "Do you think she'd be proud of me?" Lucas's heart caught. He paused the TV and turned to face him. "Jaden, your mom would be so proud of you." The boy's eyes searched his, still unsure, still needing to believe. "She'd be proud of how smart you are, how strong you are, of how you kept going, even when everything was stacked against you. She'd be proud of the way you took care of yourself, and of the way you let someone in." Jaden looked away, blinking quickly. "I'm still scared," he admitted, "that one day I'll wake up and this will all be gone, like it never happened." Lucas leaned closer. "It did happen," he said, "and I'm not going anywhere. Not ever again." Jaden didn't answer, but he moved closer, leaning into Lucas's side. They watched the rest of the documentary like that, side by side, in silence, together. In the following weeks, Lucas started working from home more often. He delegated, shifted meetings, and even canceled an investor retreat. His colleagues were baffled. The Lucas Stanford they knew had never missed a meeting in 20 years, but he didn't care what they thought. For the first time in 2 decades, he felt like a man living in the present, not chasing ghosts. He hired a lawyer to begin the adoption process, not because he needed to legally, but because he wanted it on paper. He wanted the world to know Jaden was his son. More importantly, he wanted Jaden to know it. One night, he handed Jaden a folder. Inside was a new birth certificate. Jaden opened it slowly. His name, Jaden Stanford. Lucas watched him closely. The boy's eyes welled up again, but this time, there was no fear, only awe, and something else, peace. Later that evening, Jaden placed the birth certificate next to the only other possession he truly cared about, the necklace, the heart-shaped locket with the fading engraving, "To my angel, I." He opened it for the first time in years. Inside was a photo, worn and faded, barely visible now, but it was her, Isabella, smiling with a hand on her belly, and suddenly the photo didn't feel like a mystery anymore. It felt like family. It was only a matter of time. A billionaire takes in a homeless boy, then publicly adopts him. That kind of story doesn't stay quiet, no matter how private you try to keep it, especially when the billionaire in question is Lucas Stanford. At first, it was just a whisper in the business blogs, a line or two in the financial pages. Lucas Stanford's sudden absence from tech events sparks rumors. But then someone noticed him walking hand in hand with Jaden through Central Park one Sunday afternoon. They'd been laughing, carefree, happy. Lucas had even bent down to help Jaden tie his shoe. A paparazzo had snapped the photo. It exploded online in less than a day. The headlines were relentless. Who is the mysterious boy with Lucas Stanford? Reclusive billionaire seen with child. Adoption rumors swirl. A second chance? The tragic past of Lucas Stanford revisited. People dug up everything: his wife's accident, the baby who was never found, Lucas's years of isolation. And then someone made the connection: the necklace. In one zoomed-in image, Jaden's locket was visible, the same heart-shaped charm from old wedding photos of Isabella. It didn't take long for speculation to spiral into certainty. The boy is his son. Lucas tried to shield Jaden from the noise. He told him not to read the news, not to worry about the cameras suddenly showing up outside the building. But Jaden wasn't stupid. He saw the tension. He noticed the change in Lucas's voice, the way security had doubled overnight. One morning, as Lucas was fielding a call from a public relations crisis manager, Jaden stood quietly at the edge of the doorway. "They're talking about me, aren't they?" he asked. Lucas ended the call. "Come here." Jaden walked over, arms folded across his chest like armor. "I don't care what they say," he muttered. "I'm used to people staring." Lucas knelt down. "You shouldn't have to be." Jaden looked at him, eyes guarded. "Are they going to try to take me away?" The question gutted Lucas. "No," he said firmly. "They can't. You're my son. That's not changing." But that wasn't entirely true, because not everyone in Lucas's life welcomed this change. It started with a letter from his legal team. One of the board members at Sentinel Corp had concerns. They wanted to review Lucas's judgment, his priorities, his fitness to lead in light of recent personal entanglements. Lucas crumpled the letter and threw it in the trash. Then came the family lawyer, uninvited, showing up at his penthouse in a tailored suit and a tight smile. "Lucas," he said carefully, "you know I have nothing but respect for you. But this decision, this sudden adoption, it's raising red flags." "Red flags for who?" Lucas asked, barely hiding his disgust. "For your investors, for the shareholders. Some people are wondering if this boy, this Jaden, might try to claim inheritance. If there's any documentation, if your wife—" "Stop," Lucas cut in, voice like steel. "He is my son. The rest is irrelevant." The lawyer hesitated. "Some of your extended family may disagree." Lucas narrowed his eyes. "They haven't spoken to me in years. They don't get a say now." But the warning had been clear. People were circling. Jaden sensed the shift, even without knowing the details. He spent more time alone again, in his room, headphones on. His chessboard remained untouched for days. At dinner, he was quieter, more withdrawn. Lucas finally knocked on his door one night. "Can I come in?" Jaden shrugged. "It's your house." Lucas stepped inside. It's our house. And if something's bothering you, I want to know. Jaden stared at the ceiling. They think I don't belong here. Lucas sat on the edge of the bed. Who does? Everyone. The internet. Reporters. Those guys in suits who keep calling. They think I'm a problem for you. Lucas's jaw tightened. They're wrong. Jaden looked at him then. What if they're not? Lucas leaned forward. Listen to me. You're not a problem. You're not some PR scandal. You're my son. And anyone who wants to question that can go to hell. Jaden gave a small smile. You're not really good at being subtle, huh? Lucas chuckled. Not my strong suit. The boy's smile faded. I don't want to be the reason you lose anything. Your company, your name, your reputation. Lucas was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something he hadn't said out loud in over 2 decades. I already lost what mattered once. Your mother, you. I won't lose you again. I don't care what it costs. Jaden blinked hard, trying to hold back tears. I believe you, he said softly. A week later, Lucas held a press conference. He stood before a wall of cameras, dressed not in his usual crisp gray suit, but in something simple. Dark slacks, navy shirt, sleeves rolled up. Not polished, not corporate. Real. He took a deep breath and addressed the world. Yes, the boy in the photos is my son. There was a murmur from the reporters. For years, I believed he and his mother died in a tragic accident. I lived with that grief, but fate had other plans. I recently learned that my son survived, and by some miracle, he found his way back to me. He paused, eyes steady. I brought him home, and I will protect him with everything I have. Anyone who has a problem with that, business associate or otherwise, can take their concerns elsewhere. I won't be explaining, apologizing, or negotiating when it comes to my son. He walked off stage to stunned silence. And for the first time in a long time, Lucas felt free. Jaden watched the broadcast from the couch, clutching a throw pillow to his chest. When Lucas returned home, the boy was waiting for him at the door. You really did that, Jaden whispered. Lucas knelt down and smiled. Of course I did. Jaden hugged him without hesitation, and this time, there was no fear in it. The cameras eventually faded. The noise died down. But something had shifted forever, not just in the world's perception of Lucas, but in his own heart. He'd faced storms in boardrooms, battles over billions, but none of it compared to this. Learning to be a father to a boy who once belonged to a past he thought was buried, and now represented everything his future could be. And for Jaden, the world no longer looked like something to run from. It looked like something worth growing into. The knock came on a rainy Thursday afternoon. Lucas was upstairs reviewing documents with his lawyer when the doorman called. Mr. Stanford, there's a woman here. Says her name is Marlene Davis. She claims to know Jaden. Lucas froze. The name meant nothing to him, but the way it was said, it wasn't casual. It came with weight, tension. He glanced toward Jaden's room, where the boy was curled up reading. I'll come down, Lucas said. Marlene Davis was in her early 40s, dressed in a patchy denim jacket and holding a cheap umbrella. Her eyes were sharp, defensive. She didn't smile. Lucas stepped into the lobby slowly, sizing her up. You said you know my son? She snorted. Your son, huh? That's funny, because I raised him for 4 years. Lucas's jaw tensed. Foster care? Not officially. He bounced around. Some places worse than others. When he was 7, I took him in. He stayed until he ran off. Lucas stared at her, trying to read the truth beneath the bitterness. Why are you here? I saw the press conference, she said flatly. The name, the story. I knew it was him. Same eyes, same necklace. She stepped closer. I want to talk to him. Lucas didn't move. Why? Marlene narrowed her eyes. Because he lived in my house for 4 years. Because I know things about him you don't. Lucas kept his voice calm but firm. If you hurt him, if you used him, Marlene snapped. I fed him when no one else did. I gave him a mattress when he was sleeping on concrete. I didn't beat him like the ones before me. Lucas stared her down. And yet, He ran. She didn't respond to that. Instead, she looked toward the elevator. I just want to see him. You say you love him? Then let him decide if he wants to talk. Lucas hesitated, then turned away and took the elevator back up. He found Jaden still in his room, sketching in a notebook. Hey, Lucas said softly, stepping inside. There's someone downstairs who says she knew you when you were younger. Jaden's head jerked up. His face went pale. Marlene? Lucas nodded slowly. You know her. Jaden didn't speak for a moment. Then, yeah, I know her. Lucas sat beside him. She wants to talk to you. Jaden swallowed hard. What did she say? She said she took care of you, that she fed you, gave you a place to sleep. Jaden looked down. That's mostly true. Lucas waited, silent. She wasn't bad, not like the others, but she wasn't good either. She didn't hit me, but she yelled a lot, made me sleep in the laundry room most nights, and when her boyfriend came over, I had to disappear. Lucas clenched his jaw. Jaden continued. She gave me food, yeah, but mostly so I'd stay quiet. I think part of her wanted to be kind, but she was too angry, too tired. Do you want to see her? Jaden looked away. I don't know. Lucas nodded, rising. If you do, I'll be right there. If not, she leaves. It's your call. Jaden bit his lip. After a long pause, he stood. I'll talk to her. In the lounge downstairs, Marlene sat on the edge of the leather couch, looking out of place among the marble floors and designer lighting. When Jaden entered, she stood abruptly. Jay, she breathed. God, you got tall. Jaden stayed near the doorway, uncertain. Marlene took a tentative step forward. You remember me? I never forgot you. She smiled tightly. Didn't think you would. You were always quiet, but sharp. Too sharp for your own good. Jaden didn't smile. Marlene gestured toward a chair. Can we sit? Just talk? Jaden sat. Lucas stood nearby, watching silently but giving space. Marlene folded her hands. I saw you on the news, she said. At first I thought, no way that's little Jaden. But then I saw the necklace. I remember that thing. You never let anyone touch it. Jaden touched the locket unconsciously. You really found your dad? She asked, voice softer now. Jaden nodded. Yeah. Turns out, he never knew I was alive. Marlene looked away. I always figured something was off about your story. The way you never had a file, the hospital tag you had when you came. But I didn't ask questions. You didn't want to, Jaden said. Marlene flinched. Maybe I didn't want to get too close. There was silence. Jaden finally asked, why did you come here? Marlene took a shaky breath. I guess I wanted to see if you were okay. I know I wasn't perfect, but I thought about you. A lot. After you ran. Jaden looked at her, eyes unreadable. I'm okay now. I can see that. She glanced around the penthouse, her expression flickering. You hit the jackpot, huh? Lucas bristled, but said nothing. I'm not here to ask for anything, Marlene added quickly. I just wanted to say I'm glad. You got out. You found something good. Jaden studied her, and then, gently, he said, I'm not mad at you. Marlene blinked. You weren't what I needed, he continued, but you weren't the worst, and I don't want to carry hate anymore. Marlene nodded slowly, tears forming. You sound like your mother. Jaden stiffened. You knew her. But you used to talk about her. In your sleep, over and over. My mom's an angel. She left me a necklace. She'll come get me one day. You believe that? Jaden touched the locket again, eyes soft. She did come for me, he said. He looked over at Lucas. She sent him. When Marlene left, she didn't ask for money. She didn't ask to stay in touch. She just smiled one last time. You grew into a good kid, Jay, she said. Don't let this world turn you cold. And then she was gone. That night, Jaden sat beside Lucas on the balcony, watching the lights of the city blink beneath the rain. You okay? Lucas asked. Jaden nodded. I think so. Lucas wrapped an arm around him. You don't owe anyone anything for surviving. Jaden leaned into him. I know. Then after a pause, do you think people can change? Lucas looked at him. I think some try, and some succeed, but others just keep hurting people because they don't know anything else. Was it weird for you? Jaden asked. Seeing her? Lucas thought for a long moment. Number? Because I trust you, and if seeing her helped you put something down that you've been carrying, then it was worth it. Jaden smiled faintly. I think it did. And for the first time, the shadows of Jaden's past didn't feel so heavy. They were still there, yes, but now they weren't in control. Now, there was light. It was spring when they returned to the cabin. The trees were just beginning to bud, green tips sprouting like little promises. The air was cleaner there, sharper, the kind of air that made you take slower breaths without realizing it. Lucas hadn't been to the cabin in almost 15 years. It was his and Isabella's favorite place. They used to spend entire weekends there, away from the city, away from everything. She had wanted to raise their child in the quiet. She dreamed of teaching him how to skip rocks in the lake, how to spot constellations in the wide-open night sky. But that life had vanished, or so Lucas had thought. Now it felt like he was walking back into something unfinished, with someone who wasn't a ghost, but a beginning. Jaden stood on the porch steps, looking out at the woods like he belonged there. This was hers? He asked softly. Lucas nodded. It was hers, and now it's ours. They spent the weekend together, father and son, unpacking old boxes, opening drawers Lucas hadn't dared touch in years. They found photo albums, handwritten letters, a recipe card in Isabella's handwriting with a smiley face doodled in the corner. Lucas's throat tightened when he saw it, but he didn't turn away. Jaden was quiet through most of it, but attentive, soaking it in, one memory at a time. On the second day, they found the crib. It was stored in the garage under a drop cloth, still intact, still waiting. Jaden stood in front of it for a long time, running a finger along the rail. Lucas joined him, his voice low. She built it herself, insisted on it. Jaden didn't answer, but a small smile touched his lips. Later that night, they lit a fire and sat on the deck wrapped in blankets. The sky above them was dusted with stars, the kind you never saw in the city. Jaden broke the silence. Do you think she's proud? Lucas turned to him. I know she is. Jaden leaned back in his chair, eyes still skyward. I've been thinking, he said, voice tentative, about telling the story. Lucas blinked. Our story? Jaden nodded. Not for attention, not for people online, just so others know that even when things seem hopeless, they're not always over. That family can come back in ways you never expect. Lucas smiled, a deep, slow smile. I think that's a beautiful idea. They sat in silence again, but this time it was full. Not the silence of uncertainty or fear, but of peace. Back in the city, things had settled. The media frenzy had faded, replaced with a quiet sort of respect. Lucas didn't return to Sentinel full-time. Instead, he launched a new foundation, the Isabella Fund, to support abandoned children and aging-out foster youth. Jaden helped design the logo himself, a simple locket, half open, with a beam of light shining from it. They made their first major donation anonymously to the shelter Jaden used to sleep behind. The woman who ran it never knew who the donor was, but when she opened the envelope and saw the handwritten note that said, "For the boy you didn't see, but I did," she wept. Some months later, Jaden stood on a stage at his new school's spring showcase. He was nervous. His palms were sweaty, his voice trembling. But he spoke clearly. It was a storytelling event, and he had volunteered to go last. My name is Jaden, he said, and I used to think I didn't have a story worth telling. I used to think I didn't belong anywhere. I was wrong, Jaden continued. I just hadn't lived enough of the story yet. Now I know. My story is about a woman who loved me before I ever knew her, about a necklace that reminded me who I was, and about a man who saw me one night, cold and alone, and didn't walk away. A beat of silence. I thought my life started on the streets, but really, it started the day he stopped the car. That night, Lucas tucked the certificate of adoption into a keepsake box beside a small, worn baby photo of Jaden and a wedding picture of Isabella. He added a letter, dated and sealed. Someday Jaden would read it. It began simply, "To my son, you brought me back to life." Months turned to seasons. Jaden grew taller, bolder. He laughed more easily. Sometimes Lucas would catch him staring into space with a look that seemed older than his years. But the shadows that once lived behind his eyes had faded into light. They returned to the cabin often. They started their own traditions. They even planted a tree in the backyard. An oak, the kind that grows slowly but lives for decades. Lucas carved initials into the bark one afternoon, J plus I plus L. Jaden asked what the I was for. Lucas smiled. "For your mom. She's here too." On the anniversary of Isabella's death, Jaden placed her necklace, not around his neck, but around the tree's first branch. A symbol, a tribute, a new root in the ground of their lives. He didn't need it on his chest anymore, because now he carried her inside him. And Lucas too. They weren't perfect. They still had their moments. Jaden got frustrated. Lucas overstepped. But that was life. That was family. They faced it together. Every day, Lucas was learning how to be a father, and every day, Jaden let him. And so the story ends not with a twist, but with a truth. Love doesn't always arrive the way we expect. Sometimes it comes late. Sometimes it looks like a mistake, a burden, a boy on a sidewalk in the snow. But love waits, and when you're ready, it finds its way home. Just like a necklace, lost and found. Just like a son,